Uther. Gentlemen, welcome back to the Jedi Council chambers. We are embarking upon a new mission in that galaxy far, far away. A Mario Brothers like mission, if you will, as we pick up the story of Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Disney Plus series Kenobi. I'm looking forward to talking about this, but I think Psyllium Maas, we have some backstory here that we should probably run through because this series has a lot going on behind the scenes. Take us away and let us know, how did Obi-Wan come to be?
Thank you, Jedi Masters and fellow council members, Urza Master, Lord Uther, and all of our graying Jedi fans. Yes, indeed, we are doing a hyperspace uh, speed run through of Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Disney streaming series that aired in the summer of 2022. And this one lands a little differently than some of the previous shows you can find here on the Graying Jedi that we've already gone through and given our hot and spicy takes on. We've talked about The Mandalorian for 3 seasons. We've talked about the Book of Boba Fett spinoff. We've talked about Andor, the prequel. We've talked about Ahsoka, the parallel story. But this is one that all of those shows that we've covered here so far, they have recognizable elements, sometimes music, sometimes a character, sometimes a setting, but they're all branches, right, from this main tree that we call the Skywalker Star Wars saga, this nine film set of trilogies. And this series, unlike any of the others that we've covered here, this is a main part of a trunk. This is, if you think about that tree on Octo that was struck by lightning when Luke and Yoda were questioning the need for the future of the Jedi. This is part of that thick oak tree, this series. And you can tell right away from the jump when the previously on or catching you up, it's literally a very tight 5 minute replay of the 3 prequel movies, episodes 1, 2, and 3. The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. And all of the characters and motivations and things that stem from this show are directly, this is basically almost a sequel, a direct sequel to Star Wars, the main saga. So this sets it apart from everything else we've seen from Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni and Tony Gilroy and Leslie Headland and all of that. So very interesting. We'll get our council's reaction shortly. And there is some fascinating backstory as to who worked on it and why they were chosen, the chosen ones. So part one of Obi-Wan Kenobi first aired on May 27th, 2022. And fun fact, if you were remembering at the time, that weekend, the weekend of basically Memorial Day 2022, you had the launch of Tom Cruise's Top Gun Maverick in theaters, blowing away the box office. You had the first 2 chapters in Obi-Wan Kenobi dropping simultaneously on Disney Plus, and you had the entire 4th season of Netflix's smash Stranger Things also premiering at the same time. And my significant other and I, Jeannie, we attended the Star Wars Celebration Convention that weekend in Anaheim on multiple days. In fact, we went Thursday, stayed overnight, went Friday, drove back home to check on the cats, drove back out to Anaheim Saturday, stayed overnight, and then finished it off on Sunday. It was a 4-day Star Wars extravaganza. So there was a lot going on with Obi-Wan, and we had to squeeze it in there. In fact, I think we watched some in the hotel room after we got our Disney Plus account to work through the hotel's Wi-Fi. It was a thing. But in any event, late May 2022, all 6 episodes of Obi-Wan were directed by a single director, which is also somewhat unusual, where we don't have multiple people behind the camera doing week to week or a couple of weeks at a time. And it was Deborah Chow who did all 6 installments. We've talked about Miss Chow before, particularly for her work in the first season of The Mandalorian. She did 2 episodes. She did Chapter 3, The Sin, which we talked about on Warp Core, all the way back on Warp Core 20. You can go back and check the Jedi Archives, friends. That was the first time we brought up Deborah. And she also worked on Chapter 22, or Chapter 7, The Reckoning, and that was in Warp Core 22. So, first season Mandalorian, Deborah Chow nailed it. And as a result, she was offered and took over the Obi-Wan directing duties. We talked about her career back then, but just to remind you, she worked on other television shows, Mr. Robot, Fear the Walking Dead, Better Call Saul. So she's an established TV director of drama and action. Originally, Obi-Wan Kenobi, like the Book of Boba Fett, was always intended to be a feature. The whole let's turn it into Disney Plus streaming, that came downstream, pun intended. But originally they wanted to do a movie with the same basic setup that Obi-Wan and his protege Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader, aka Lord of the Sith, would have some sort of confrontation between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. And the first writer that they turned to write a movie screenplay for this was somebody I actually had brunch with at a dim sum restaurant in 1997. Well before he became who he is now. He was just a young, struggling Australian screenwriter. And we happened to be, my writing partner and I happened to be working on a project for a company with Australian ties that had a deal at Warner Brothers. And this woman who ran that company said, "Hey, we're having brunch, at a dim sum place in West Hollywood on, Saturday. Come on down." So my writing partner and I joined him. There was about 10 people there, and one of them was Stuart Beattie, this young Australian screenwriter who at the time had a script about a rogue kangaroo that was about to enter theaters called Joey. Now you can look that up on your favorite streaming or other platforms. I never watched it. Never thought it was any something that I needed to, but that was what he was excited about, was Joey. He went on to actually get a pretty good career going. He wrote Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. He was the original writer on that. He worked on Michael Mann's Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx. He did the vampire movie 30 Days of Night, which was a gory film set in Alaska during total darkness. He also worked on G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra. And I don't know how many G.I. Joe fans are out there. I don't know if that's the good one.
Right there makes me love it.
Okay, G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra. Okay. I think that was the first one with the Wayans brothers in there somewhere. Not the one with Bruce Willis and Channing Tatum, although Channing Tatum may have been in both of them. I don't know. I'm really behind on my G.I. Joe Hasbro big screen movies. But anyway, Stuart Beattie gets the first assignment. Naturally, as they do in Star Wars, you don't ever keep your first assignment. You go ahead and fire them and hire someone else to rewrite it. And they had an odd and interesting choice for the rewriter. This was Hossein Amani. Hossein actually came from like the world of Miramax and Merchant Ivory films. So he was not the first choice you would think to do a Star Wars picture, but he was a bold choice because he had a completely different voice than somebody who worked on Pirates of the Caribbean and G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra. And his credits included The Wings of the Dove, where he was nominated for an Oscar, Gangs of New York with Daniel Day-Lewis, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Martin Scorsese, and an absolutely criminally underrated Ryan Gosling thriller, Drive, from 2011. I urge you to check that out if you haven't seen it. But anyways, he was a bold choice for Lucasfilm, and he was rewriting Stuart. At the time, the director of Obi-Wan was going to be Stephen Daldry, And he too came from a sort of dramatic Miramax New York background. He had done Billy Elliot, The Hours with Nicole Kidman, and Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close with Tom Hanks and Sandra Bullock, I believe. So this would have been a very different Obi-Wan if Stephen Daldry and Hossein Amani had actually kept their feature. But as Solo, a Star Wars story underperformed. In our cases, some of us on the council disagree with that assessment in terms of its reaction. The finances speak for themselves, but we think that picture may have gotten a raw deal. We'll discuss that further on the Graying Jedi. You can bet on that. There was a move behind Lucasfilm to say, okay, forget it. Now we won't do movies. We'll do streaming shows for the new streaming channel. So suddenly the 2-hour feature was reworked to be a 6-hour television project. And they brought in yet another person to oversee that, and his name is Joby Harold. And his credits, he's worked around too in sort of more the Stuart Beatty vein. They kind of went back to more commercial, less art house, more action. Joby Harold has worked on Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt. He worked on the John Wick 3 Parabellum. He worked on The Flash, which came out from DC a couple of summers ago. He worked on Transformers Rise of the Beasts, which I believe is the one with the dinosaurs. And speaking of dinosaurs and monsters, he apparently was the showrunner for Monarch Legacy of Monsters, which was the Godzilla King Kong spinoff on Apple TV starring Kurt Russell, where they do the organization that hunts down Kong and Godzilla and all that, and Mothra, and there was a whole series they did about these monster hunters. So I guess that was Joby Harold. So like I say, he's got a little bit more commercial flavor under his belt. He became the showrunner. Deborah Chow is our director. Natalie Holt did our score, but we got an extra treat. John Williams, the maestro himself, contributed an all-new main theme for Obi-Wan, which plays a little bit in the credits, mostly in the end credits of each episode, and it's fantastic if you haven't heard it. It's new, and yet it seems to seamlessly fit into the Star Wars vernacular for his themes. And our cinematographer should also be noted. He's a South Korean, Chung Chung Hoon, and he is one of the most sought after cinematographers in Hollywood these days. He did Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. He did Stephen King's It, parts 1 and 2. He did the Zombieland sequel, Zombieland Double Tap. And he did Timothée Chalamet's Wonka most recently. But everyone wants to work with Chung Chung Hoon. Apparently, he is a much desired cinematographer, and he gives Obi-Wan the desert sheens and metallic iciness of its look. Returning to the action, obviously you wouldn't have Obi-Wan Kenobi without Obi-Wan Kenobi. Ewan McGregor is first and foremost. He's practically in every scene. He's an executive producer. So without him, none of this is possible. Joining him, Rupert Friend as the Grand Inquisitor, Moses Ingram as Reva, third sister, Sung Kang as fifth brother, your trio of Inquisitors, former Jedi who have now turned to hunting their own in the time between Revenge of the Sith and New Hope. If you want to know more about the Inquisitors, you can check out Dave Filoni's animated show Rebels, which goes into great detail how they were formed, and it has the Grand Inquisitor character that we see here in animated form, not just live action. Rebels, seasons 1 and 2 in particular. Vivian Lyra Blair is Baby Leia. They said, hey, we did very well with the Baby Yoda over in the other show. Why not a very young, very scrappy Leia Organa? And she was also in the Stephen King adaptation, The Boogeyman, a couple of summers ago.
And anytime there's children involved in shows, Cody absolutely loves it. So I can't wait to hear his take on that.
That should be spicy. Kumail Nanjiani as Haja. Hayden Christensen returning as Lord Vader. Indira Varma as Tala. You might remember her all the way back from HBO's Rome, which was a much too short gladiator style television show. Did very well. It just got too expensive. O'Shea Jackson Jr. He's straight out of Compton, and he's Ice Cube's progeny, and he's playing Roken. We'll see him a bit later in the show. Joel Edgerton and Bonnie Please reprise their roles as Owen and Beru Lars. Flea, that's right, Flea. He's come a long way since his brief cameos in Back to the Future Part 2 and Part 3, trying to get Marty McFly to do nefarious things at work. And we'll talk about Flea shortly, but always nice to see a familiar face in a galaxy far, far away. Jimmy Smits returns as Bail Organa, and Ian McDiarmid will return, spoiler alert, as Emperor Sheev Palpatine. So, gentlemen, those are the players. That's how it all got made. As far as the episodes go, again, the first one is directed by Deborah Chow. The credits read story by Stuart Beatty and Hossein Amani, because again, it was their scripts that they adapted and extended and turned into, reworked into television. And then your teleplay credit is by Joby Harold, the new showrunner, Hossein Asami, and Stuart Beatty. So some of what Beatty and Amani wrote is in here. It could be dialogue, it could be characters, it could be scenes, sequences. But again, think of it as like construction framing. And then Joby Harold came in and put in the drywall and other things around the frame and sturdied it up, if you will. So that's why you see a bunch of names at the end of the episode for who wrote it and why their names are all there. But you'll see a lot of story by Stuart Beatty and Hossein Amani credits throughout the series, because it was their original screenplays that were later adapted. But gentlemen, we all imagined, what's Obi-Wan been doing for the 19 years that take place between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope? This show takes place 10 years after Revenge of the Sith and Order 66. So it is 9 years still before the Battle of Yavin. And just to put other Star Wars prequels kind of in that range, Solo, which shows the young Han Solo and Chewbacca and all of that, that takes place from a 3-year span in the movie, from 13 years before Yavin to 10. So this comes in 1 year after Solo, a Star Wars story. And Andor, a show we're also greatly enjoying here on The Graying Jedi, Season 2 coming in 2025. Andor takes place beginning the first season 5 years before the Battle of Yavin. So this show, Obi-Wan, is 4 years before our first glimpse of Cassian Andor. So that's where we're kind of all, if you're trying to keep it all straight, Revenge of the Sith, then Solo, a Star Wars story, then Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then Andor, and then Rogue One. And that's how the prequel series and films have kind of stretched in there in between the main story, Skywalker saga. But we all guessed, we all imagined, we all hoped, what is Obi-Wan doing on Tatooine looking after Luke? We get plenty of that in this show. We get a great opening in the temple, Order 66, which we will probably circle back to as the show goes on. We see that Obi-Wan has got a really terrible day job, and an even worse commute. Like, he's got to go, in an open air speeder on Tatooine's twin blazing suns just to get to Anchorhead, a new location that we have not yet seen. We've only heard referenced in Star Wars. And from there, he has to get on an Eope, resurrected from the Phantom Menace, and ride that poor thing way out into the desert to a cave where he doesn't have much in the way of furnishings. So, and then he has to get up in the morning and do the whole thing all over again. So we see him. It's the daily grind. He's slicing up a Kyrite dragon, it looks like, and sneaking pieces off in order to feed his Eopie. He just keeps his head down at work. He sees injustice all around him, but he's not there to make waves. He's just there to punch his time card and keep an eye on Luke. We see the toy that Luke is playing with in A New Hope. We see how that ended up at the Lars homestead there. I absolutely want to shout out the Jawa scene. I think it's one of the best Jawa scenes in all of Star Wars because it's just this matter-of-fact conversation between Obi-Wan and this very sort of mouthy Jawa. And in fact, in most cases, we don't see subtitles for the Jawas. We just get the funny noises and that. But here it was, I just think that's one of my favorite scenes of both the episode and the series at large. It has the perfect tone when he says, if you're going to steal my parts, could you and sell them back to me, could you at least clean them? And the Jawa is just like nonplussed, like, hey, guy's got to make a living. And the theme of the first episode in particular, the theme of the show initially, is just how beaten down Obi-Wan is. This is not the man we see in the previews of a young, confident, doing backflips in the Phantom Menace and calling to Anakin, it's over, I have the high ground. Life has crushed him, and he tells the fugitive Jedi in the desert, the fight is done, we lost. And so it's an interesting place to start because we haven't really seen that in the main films with Ben. He's always seemed like the wise sage who could accomplish just about anything. And so this is a new look for him. But by the episode's end, we will see him taking his first steps into a larger journey as a shot of redemption, if you will. And as that storyline's going on and the Inquisitors are scouring Tatooine and Anchorhead for any fugitive Jedi, including Mr. Kenobi, we have Leia and her adopted parents, including Senator Bail Organa. And we have our first real glimpse of Alderaan, right? I mean, we never saw it in the original trilogy. We didn't. It got blown up. And we got like a 30-second glimpse. In fact, I think it's the entire shot in the preview of past adventures. You know, it looked like a nice snow foresty planet. But here we get to see the architecture, we get to see the interiors, we get to see the woods. So we get a sense of what Leia lost and so many people in the galaxy lost when Tarkin and the Death Star destroyed it. And so that's interesting because now when you go back and watch New Hope, there'll be a little twinge, right? You'll be like, oh, you know, it's not just a planet that, you know, green, blue on the outside, and we, you know, talked about it for 15 seconds before it went boom. It's interesting. It's a nice look at it. It's someplace I'd like to visit, much more so than Mustafar. But gentlemen, I mean, this is a tone setter. It's a world builder. It's going to, you know, catapult us into a series of amazing adventures. How did we feel with part one of Obi-Wan Kenobi?
I can confidently tell you, I have never been so excited for something Star Wars in my life. And I lived through the release of the re-release of the original trilogy when they did all the digital updates, which suck. I was through the second re-release where they added even more digital crap, which also sucks. All three prequels, which I think I enjoyed them less at the time than I do now. I definitely have earned a lot of appreciation, and Hayden Christensen, as we'll see in this show, does a lot to help that. So much great writing has come to Star Wars via Disney Plus. I was absolutely thrilled by this first episode. It gave me the Obi-Wan I'd always wanted to see. And it sounds strange to say, but I wanted to see the defeated Obi-Wan. You barely get a sense of it at the end of episode 3 where, you know, he's giving Leia over to Senator Organa. He's taking Luke to, you know, Owen and Beru, and it's just like you just leave him off, and it's like, okay, next we see him, he's, an old man in the desert, and the question is, well, what happens next? Like, what does he do for the next 18 years? Which, by the way, this planet has a very odd way of aging a person. um, but if you've ever lived in the desert or been to the desert, I'm sure you can imagine why. Um, I, I mean, we talk about great writing all the time, but just looking at some of the quotes from this episode, two that stuck with me are the first two. Funny enough, they're the first two exchanges on IMDb. One is between Owen Lars and Obi-Wan. The other is Bail Organa and Obi-Wan. And it gives you this picture of just how defeated Obi-Wan is, but how committed he is. So he's very much claiming, I'm not the Obi-Wan you remember. I'm a very different Obi-Wan, but he's still the Obi-Wan we remember, right? So when he's talking to Owen, he's like, it's just a toy, Owen. There's a lot more out there in the galaxy, and Luke needs to know that. And it's like, no, you failed with Anakin. And I mean, it just hits you so hard emotionally in this little quick exchange. And, it's really truly that transformation of Obi-Wan to Ben. Obi-Wan seems to carry some weight, that name alone. Ben, on the other side, is just like, it's like being named Jeff Kenobi. Like, oh, yeah, it's just Ben. I mean, it just feels so like, blah. And then you see him with Organa on Alderaan, which I totally agree. Really gives you a lot more emotional punch watching the Death Star blow it up now. But this whole, like, I'm not the Jedi Knight I once was. I don't know that I can go save Leia. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why you're calling me, because what am I to do? They're still slaughtering Jedi. They're still, beating us into submission. This empire is, we clearly have, we're not just defeated. We've literally lost hope. Ha 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 ha. Ha. And
See what
you get the sense that, like, Obi-Wan's kind of like, all right, I guess if this is how I am to end, like, I dedicated my life to these twins, I have to, right? I I don't know. It's the kind of a show opener. Like, they got to give you some good punch anytime you're opening a new series, but I did not expect it to be as hard hitting, as gripping, without a lot of action. There's a lot of real blah kind of stuff going on in this episode. Like, literally, that journey to work to cut up mystery meat. That was like a 5-minute sequence, 8-minute sequence. It's a very long portion of this episode, but it really glares out in my head, because it's like, boy, is there anything more defeating than going to work at a meat cutting job in the desert of all places? I just, you really develop a sense of feeling for this character that we all know and love, right? You already love this character going into the show, but I think that was an amazing challenge the writers had to take on. It was like, how do you make the audience love this character even more than they already do? Like, if you came up to me on the street anytime before this series and said, hey, do you love Obi-Wan Kenobi? I'd be like, hell yeah, I love Obi-Wan Kenobi. After this episode, they'd be like, do you love Obi-Wan Kenobi? I'd be like, oh, of course I do. So it was everything I hoped for, and then like 100% more. Like, they doubled up on just how much was going on. And that's just Obi-Wan. There's a lot of other things going on in this episode that was like, oh, I had no idea about this kind of stuff. So yeah, that was my gut reaction, and that was a big reaction for me.
Yes. So I think there's they I like the defeated Ben who is purposefully not in touch with the Force. It's to me it's very religious like someone who's lost their faith. This guy's lost his faith, right? In a sense, because they've been defeated, and he doesn't want to be detected either. Obviously, that has something to do with it. But purposefully cutting himself off, um, so he can protect the child in a sense. um, which, by the way, the scene with all the younglings, that means that Riva and Grogu might have had some interaction at some point.
They were
Uh,
classmates. Yeah.
so I was, yeah, they're classmates, so that has my mind, wondering a little bit. Um, but yeah, I like the idea of setting, this just sets the tone for the entire series, almost coming off as kind of blah. You can feel his hopelessness and almost, I mean, he still has a sense of purpose, but nothing like before, right? So I think that was something else that really sticks out. My Oh, I'm jumping ahead an episode. I can't mention that yet. In my notes, I had something written down, but I don't want to jump into the second episode yet because I had something come up with that. Go ahead. Oh, I thought
No,
you wanted to say something.
yeah, I did. The like you say, the guy cutting himself off from the Force, feeling defeated. Did this go over better for you then than Luke's appearance in the Last Jedi, which was, I mean, in terms of real life, 5 years before Obi-Wan was on screens, we had the Last Jedi in theaters, and I know we haven't talked about Last Jedi yet, but that's going to be a somewhat jarring conversation, I'm sure. But
Well,
just
for you.
on the broad strokes, did it feel better here, or did it feel more natural? Like what? Why would one be kind of like I don't like it versus the other one where it's like, oh, this is perfect? Like I
Well,
don't know, just I'm
uh, let,
curious.
let me put it to you this way. My wife's car burning oil is better than The Last Jedi. So anything is better than The Last Jedi. So yes, this is definitely leaps beyond uh, that whole thing because, as you know, my position is that everyone knows that whole thing is screwed up with The Last Jedi. So yes, it's more believable, and it comes back to great writing, like you said. I even like how they're attending that party, and it feels like Andor when Mon Mothma is having these parties and all these people are interacting. I had that same feeling that this is what these people go through as senators, and the big charade they're constantly having to put up so no one can figure out who they are, but all the pomp and circumstance that goes along with it. So that was something else that I think is great writing. That you can still connect Andor to this series in a sense. I think is just a great representation of what we're going to see in the future with the excellent writing. Um, with that, here's my quick question to both of you: would you have rather watch this in the theater, or is this a TV series?
I think what Jedi Master Urza Master suggests, this sort of 8 minutes, and it was kind of broken up. Like I think he took the trip 3 times. First we see him, and then middle of the episode, and then near the end. I think if you're doing a movie, you have to lose at least two of those sequences because you got to get things moving, right? And so I think some of that emotion and shading we're talking about, that depth, that's obviously what you get when you have more runway to play with in a television show. So would we have a scene of Obi-Wan cutting mystery meat and then taking the commute? Yes, but it would just be that. It would be a single sequence, and then we'd immediately cut to Owen being threatened by Riva and in the square. And you're in a hurry in movies to hit plot points and narrative beats, whereas with the show, as we've established, you have more time to actually spend time with these characters and maybe write some things, some additional things that otherwise would, we wouldn't have Bail attempting to, I mean, Obi-Wan would get the message from Bail that his daughter's been kidnapped, and he would immediately in a movie, he would have to take the job. Whereas here, he turns him down. He hangs up on him, is don't call me, blah, blah, blah. And then Bail has to go to Tatooine to make a personal entreaty. I mean, there's just a lot of things that would have fallen out. And like I say, the things that we're talking about that you enjoy, that make the show deep and rich, uh, they would be sacrificed in order to make sure we hit all of our story points. So would it look great on the big screen? Absolutely. But would it be less about character and more about just what happened? Because we've got to get to him and Anakin. Like halfway through the movie, they're going to have to, meet, and then they're going to have to refight. And I mean, so I think that's how you look at it. I think we're blessed that we were able to get 6 hours.
Yeah, I have to say I'd love to see this in the theater, but I wouldn't change anything about it. I'd rather have 6 movies and have them each be a lot longer, just to get more. Plus, I'm a sucker for Ewan McGregor. Like I sort of like seeing Mary Elizabeth Winstead in Ahsoka. I could do with 8 episodes of Ahsoka in the theater. I would absolutely love it. But I tend to agree. You're losing a lot of pacing in a movie. You have to move along. Even in today's age, where a 3.5 hour movie is not that uncommon, you're still losing most of the series in 3.5 hours. I I I think you could easily put this on the movie screen and not just stream it off of Disney Plus. Like it would be just fine with just a giant screen. I want to see an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie. I really do. I want there to be a season 2 for sure. But I think you could do an Obi-Wan movie even so. I think you could tie it into any number of pre-original series or original trilogy storylines. Maybe Jabba the Hutt versus Obi-Wan. Bounty hunters looking for Obi-Wan because the Inquisitors have all been rooted out or, murdered by Vader because they failed to find Obi-Wan. But who knows better than Jabba what's going on Tatooine? Jabba doesn't care. I think that would make a really compelling movie, and you could introduce some of the solo characters in that movie. Even the Millennium Falcon could show up. So there's a lot of territory here to cover, and luckily, McGregor's only going to be the right age. So that being said, I I think there's a lot we could talk about, but we're going to start dusting up on the rest of the series because the first episode really just put us into the path of what this series is going to be about, which is essentially a rescue mission. If not a rescue mission of Obi-Wan himself, in a way. So, gentlemen, for this first episode, your kyber crystals, I'm curious, what color do they emit? We'll start with Lord Uther this week.
To both your points, it's just good to have Ben Kenobi on a screen anywhere. And Ewan McGregor, we can't tell the difference between him and Alec Guinness, and I think that's what makes it so perfect, right? And I still feel like Solo, as we continue to say, was just, I thought it was great. I think people completely missed out on that. I think it was, whether it was, marketed wrong or whatever, people are really missing out if they haven't seen it. But I'm going to go green, just like my lights, because I'm happy that I'm getting Obi-Wan Kenobi and I'm getting great writing and connections are being made between films. I think that's a really big deal. One other thing I'll throw out there is I think Picard season 3 stole from Obi-Wan Kenobi a little bit in terms of Picard's communicator going off inside of a box, and then he opens it up and takes it out, and he's like, "Who could be contacting me?" And it was felt like a complete take from Obi-Wan Kenobi. And you know what? If they did, I'm still happy because Picard season 3, mwah, oh, so wonderful. All right, there, Psyllium.
Green Endor Rebel Trooper Commando from 1983, original size, still has most of the original paint. This is one of those action figures that when you ask for Christmas to get Luke or Han or Darth Vader, and they went to Toys R Us, Google Toys R Us, younglings, if you don't remember what that was. This was the only thing left on the pegs, was Rebel, anonymous Rebel Andor soldier, or Endor soldier. But here he is. I lost his blaster a long time ago, but he still looks pretty good, and he definitely continues the tradition of Emerald Green Star Wars episodes on Disney Plus.
Fantastic. And I'll stick with the toy route, and I'm gonna go Slave One Green.
Ooh, nice.
If there was a greener green than green, this would be the episode. This is, I think, for an aging Star Wars fan, this is exactly what you wanted Disney Plus to do. This and Andor, I think, are the two shows that are for, shall we say, the maturing fan. Ahsoka definitely is in there, of course, too. But those two shows, it's fantastic writing, it's tremendous acting, it's amazing cinematography, and really, it does give you Star Wars again. It gives you A New Hope all over again in the best way possible. Until we meet again, Jedi out there on Pending Rebrand, hit subscribe. Let us know what you thought of Obi-Wan Episode 1, and we will see you again in a galaxy far, far away. Whew, Psyllium dropped off right at the end of that episode, but that's okay.
Right at the end. I've got to dump my browser while we're uploading here, so I'll do that while you guys do whatever. Hang on here. Learn more.